Greetings and welcome to the Cancer Interview Podcast. I'm your host, Bruce Morton. While on most of our episodes we feature survivors and details of their cancer journey, we have to keep in mind that in many instances that journey is made easier by a caregiver. On this segment, our guest is Pam Mendenhall of Dubuque, Iowa, who was and is a caregiver extraordinaire by giving care to 3 members of her family. I find her story inspirational, and I hope you will too. So now let's get to it. And Pam, welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the opportunity to share my story. I really appreciate it.
And we look forward to hearing it. Pam, one of the things that we always do when we start out on our interviews is that we want to get to know a little bit more about you. So if you would, just let us know your background a little bit, where you're from, what you've done for your life's work, and what you like to do with your free time.
Okay. Well, I've lived in Dubuque almost my entire life, attended school here, Clark College, and earned a degree in psychology and sociology, and then decided that wasn't enough to pay the bills, so went on to get a master's degree in social work at the University of Iowa. So I am a Hawkeye. And since that time, I've been a school social worker for 26 years, which I really enjoy doing. I go around to different schools. I work with children with special needs. So.
Now, you mentioned being from Dubuque, D-U-B-U-Q-U-E. Does that ever get mispronounced?
All the time. Yes, it does. Unless you are very old and you've heard the Dubuque ham commercials when you were younger.
All right. Now, before we go any farther, we just want to remind you as you watch and listen, if you like what you hear on this episode, we invite you to subscribe to our podcast and our YouTube channel by clicking on the links below. When there, you will see a bell icon. And if you click on that, that means anytime we post a new episode, you will get it. So now let's get started. And if you would, Pam, describe the health of your family, what it was like prior to the diagnosis of thyroid cancer with your daughter, Alyssa. Would you say overall your family was in pretty good health?
Oh, we were all in very good health. And I made sure, of course, to feed my kids, 3 square meals a day and lots of vegetables and fruits to stay healthy. We did a lot of traveling, exercising to stay healthy. Ironically, when I would take my daughters to the dentist, I would refuse to get them x-rays because I didn't want them to cause any ill effects on my children. So yeah, pretty happy, easygoing lifestyle.
All right. Now, your daughter, Alyssa, was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. When did you first get any inkling that something might not be right?
Well, this maybe I can kind of sequence our little journey here, but she was 9 years old. So that was in about February of 2005. She was sitting down, rubbing her neck. She called me in the room and said, "Mommy, what's this?" And of course, I kind of felt her neck, and Googled it, started scaring myself, and then made a doctor appointment right away. So went to her pediatrician here in Dubuque, and he basically said that was beyond his expertise, referred us to Iowa City, where the journey began. They did what's called a fine needle biopsy on her largest nodule. By this time, we had gone and had ultrasounds done, and she had several nodules. And so in Iowa City, they said, we'll biopsy the largest nodule because that one has the highest chance of being cancer. So I remember traveling down there, and she was only 9 years old, in a room, and they made her put her little head back, and without any anesthesia, they started doing a biopsy on her nodule, and they did what's called biopsy passes. So it's where you put the needle in very quickly, in and out, in and out, in and out. So they did this 3 or 4 times, took the needle out. I thought, oh, they're done. They weren't done. they did that about 2 more times. So she's crying, she's upset. I reminded her that, honey, next month we're going to go to Disney World and we'll have so much fun and it'll be okay. So it calmed her down maybe a tiny bit, but it was very, very rough to see her going through that. So we did get the results back pretty quickly. They said it was benign, and of course I was elated. And they diagnosed her with something called Hashimoto's, which is basically where your immune system starts attacking your thyroid. And I thought, okay, well, that maybe explains it. But then I started to do some more reading. Of course, I tried to stay on the reputable sites, Mayo, MD Anderson. And I remember reading with Hashimoto's that usually your blood work is abnormal. But Alyssa's levels were not off. They were pretty normal. So that was kind of a red flag. That didn't add up for me. So we kind of lived our lives. The next month we did go to Disney World. That was in March of 2005. And kind of the next part of our journey began when we were sitting at Disney World watching a Beauty and the Beast show, a live show. And my youngest daughter lifted her neck up to watch the lights. And I looked over and I noticed a lump in her neck also. So that obviously stressed me out a lot. Didn't end up enjoying the trip as much as I would have liked to. So we ended up taking her in also to University of Iowa. She only had 1 nodule, but we had a fine needle aspiration on her nodule also. But I insisted they put her under anesthesia this time because I didn't want to see her going through what my oldest daughter went through. So they did. They did the procedure, and they told us that her nodule was also benign, just a benign adenoma nodule. So I thought, okay, well, that's good. Then, of course, I got to thinking. I had a gut feeling that something just wasn't right. To have a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old with thyroid nodules was extremely rare. So got a referral to the University of Wisconsin in Madison for a second opinion. And it's there we saw an endocrinologist. She was basically our angel. She looked at Alyssa's neck immediately and said her thyroid needed to be removed. It was a hard, solid lumps that she found in her neck. She also looked at my younger daughter Jessica's neck and said her nodule was suspicious too. So she was so concerned at that appointment. I remember she called one of the best surgeons in Madison down to consult and take a look at their necks. So needless to say, after that appointment, I was kind of freaking out again, thinking, well, the biopsy was negative. What's going on? And so anyway, we decided, obviously, to have it out, Alyssa's thyroid out. Even at her pre-surgical appointment, this was in November 2005, the nurse even tried to talk me out of having her thyroid removed because she said it's very rare in children. I'm sure she probably doesn't have cancer. And are you sure you want to do this? Because if you remove her thyroid, she's going to need that hormone replacement therapy for the rest of her life. So again, I paused and thought, but I thought, I trust this doctor. I have to have it out. So November 21st, 2005, we had our thyroid removed. And on November 23rd, 2005, 2 days later, which was the day before Thanksgiving, we got a call from the surgeon who was actually in New York on vacation seeing his children for Thanksgiving, and he told us it was cancer. He also said it was follicular thyroid cancer, which is even more unusual in children. Usually that's reserved for people who are over 60. So again, very odd for a 10-year-old, she was 10 at that time, to have follicular thyroid cancer. So needless to say, that was the absolute worst Thanksgiving of my life. I then had the hard decision of whether or not to treat her with what they call radioactive iodine therapy. They have radiation basically in a liquid or pill form that's supposed to kill off those extra thyroid cells. So usually there's remnants left in a neck after thyroid cancer. The surgeon obviously can't get all of the thyroid cells, although they scrape the vocal cords. It's impossible to get everything. So the radioactive iodine kind of does the cleanup work afterward. So again, this was a hard decision. I didn't want to expose her to radiation at 10, but wanted to make sure the cancer was gone. So I basically had to make the best decision I could with the knowledge that I had. So a little bit of pressure there.
Well, Pam, you're not a doctor, and it sounds like you had immediately sprung into caregiver mode just with the research you did. How stressful was your having to make that sort of 50-50 decision?
Oh, and it was a steep learning curve. I just educated myself. Like I said, the nuclear medicine doctor said, well, it's minimally invasive follicular thyroid cancer. We don't necessarily have to give radiation, but if you want to make sure the cancer's gone, we do. She had kind of a large remnant in her neck because the doctor didn't know it was cancer at the time. They went in thinking it was not cancer. So yeah, I did a lot of research. So we did decide, like I said, to go ahead. And December 2005, we wanted to give her the radioactive iodine. Me, with my paranoia, wanted to make sure that that cancer was completely gone. But I felt a little bit better than saying we could give her a very low dose. So we did that. We traveled to Madison again. That was December 16th, 2005. So it's about 2 hours away from Dubuque. The way the treatment works is you have to first take a liquid or pill form of the radioactive iodine, and then 3 days later you have the scan. So we went up December 16th, 2005, and I remember sitting in the room. The nuclear medicine doctor came in with this thick cement block of liquid radioactive iodine, told us not to get too close to her. So I remember after she drank it, she started coughing, coughed on her sweater. The doctor said, that's contaminated. You need to wash that sweater 2 or 3 times, or better yet, throw it out. Talked about isolation for 3 days, precautions at home. We had to move her little sister out of the house so she wouldn't be exposed to the radiation. Had to wash her dishes separately, her clothes separately. Anything she touched in her room had to be removed for at least 3 months. And they told me no hugs, no kisses, but I couldn't stay away from my 10-year-old for 3 days with no hugs and kisses. So I broke that law, broke that rule, went in there frequently. But all I could think of after that was, here I am making my daughter drink something that's so toxic to others that everybody had to stay away from her for 3 days. But we got through that. 3 days later, of course, we had to go back up for the scan. That was December 19th, 2005. It was a snowy day, winter storm warnings, but we had to get up there for that scan. So we get up there, and it turns out the machine was broken that she was supposed to have the scan on. And ironically enough, they had to call somebody from Dubuque to go up to Madison to fix it. So anyway, longest 2 hours of my life, they fixed it. We did the scan, and luckily it didn't show any cancer beyond her neck. There was a little kind of star that lit up in her neck, but beyond that, we were lucky it didn't metastasize anywhere at that time. So because Alyssa had cancer, of course, we thought, with my youngest daughter, Jessica, we thought we need to have hers removed also. She has a nodule, hers could be cancer too. So in January of 2006, a month after Alyssa's radioactive iodine, we had Jessica's thyroid removed, and hers was not cancer, but they defined it as an atypical follicular adenoma, which basically it's very suspicious. It probably would have gone on to become cancer had we not removed it. Again, because our endocrinologist, our angel in Madison, knows that it's exceedingly rare for a 10 and a 6-year-old to have thyroid nodules cancer, that's when they referred us to the genetic clinic at UW-Madison. So they collected blood from the 4 of us, myself, my husband, my 2 daughters, and also my husband's parents, thinking one of our parents, they're probably the carriers of something causing these thyroid nodules. So after we sent our blood work, they sent it out to the Cleveland Clinic. And in June of 2006, they found my husband, his dad, and both of my daughters had what's called a 26 pair deletion on their 10th chromosome. and they call it a P10 mutation. So oftentimes people who have this mutation have something called Cowden syndrome, which is basically, unfortunately for my family, a cancer syndrome, because it places people who have this syndrome at risk for 6 additional cancers. So those cancers are breast, endometrial, thyroid, kidney, colorectal, and skin cancer, specifically melanoma. So they're at higher risk for all of those cancers. I think finding this out really was a harder blow to take than finding out Alyssa had thyroid cancer, because it meant, wow, my family is at risk for all of these other cancers. So that was just very overwhelming to deal with, because you feel so helpless. You know, you can't change their genetics. So dealing with that was difficult. In that time span too, we also, because I highly believe in second opinions, in July of 2006, we traveled to Houston, Texas, and went to the MD Anderson clinic to get a second opinion from a specialist in the area of pediatric thyroid cancer. Again, another one of our angels. And he reassured us that we were on the right track. And, you know, we were like, great, I'm glad we're doing things the right way. At this appointment, the doctor asked if he could feel my husband's neck, because at this time we knew nothing about my husband or myself, or if we had anything. And we said, sure. So he felt my husband's neck, and he said, your husband has several nodules in his thyroid. So because of that, then we had my husband's thyroid removed in August of 2006. So within the course of probably 9 months, everybody in our family had their thyroid removed, with the exception of myself, and we like to joke, and the dog. So the dog and I were the only two. But you know, and looking back kind of at all this, I thought I was kind of kicking myself, because when looking at pictures of Alyssa, like her communion pictures when she was 2nd and 3rd grade, I saw her nodule in those pictures, and I'm like, how could I have missed that? So again, kicking myself for not finding that earlier. So anyway, we continued with the genetic workup, because things change very fast in the genetic world with technology. About 3 years ago, we ended up going to the Cleveland Clinic, and we had what's called whole genome sequencing done there to look at, are there any other chromosomal defects, any other mutations that they could find which might account for their thyroid issues, aside from the P10 mutation. So that was 3 years ago. We're still waiting for those results. We're hoping those come in at some point and give us some information, but I guess that brings us to now. We're doing, you know, as far as surveillance, both the girls and my husband need frequent blood work, ultrasounds. You know, with thyroid cancer, it's good and bad. It's slow growing, which can be good and bad. You know, it's great it's slow growing because you can catch it in time, but it's bad because it could come back 10 years, 20 years, 30 years later. It wouldn't be uncommon. Whereas I know with other cancers, you hit that 5-year mark and you're celebrating. Not so much with thyroid cancer, again, because it kind of creeps up on you. So surveillance is very important for both of my kids. And I do just as much for Jessica, even though she wasn't diagnosed formally with cancer as Alyssa. They'll also need, because of their mutation, surveillance for breast cancer, MRIs. They'll need endometrial biopsies, kidney ultrasounds, urinalyses to check for blood in urine, skin checks, colonoscopies. All of those things will have to happen at an earlier age for them because of their genetic mutation. And this is a very novel mutation that they have not seen in anyone else that we know of.
Now, Pam, let me ask you about your role in this. Obviously, you did the research at an early stage, and you had, for obvious reasons, a front row seat for what went on with your 2 daughters and husband. But meanwhile, you still have a job. You still have a routine, and it was a routine that obviously underwent some severe alterations. How did your how did your day-to-day life change now that you're caregiving for 3 people?
Well, I thought at first I would have to dip into my family medical leave, but I managed not to have to do that. I think maybe because they were spread out. And because with Alyssa, I know I did so much research on just the thyroid cancer, the thyroid disease and issues, that, you know, they all 3 were kind of dealing with the same thing. But yeah, with my daily life, it was, luckily my job is flexible, so I could make some phone calls during the day to doctors, making sure that blood work gets done, making sure the follow-up scans get done. So it would not be uncommon for me to spend an hour over my lunch break 2 or 3 days a week making phone calls to doctors. And insurance is a whole other story. That would be a whole other program.
All right. Now, I want to ask you about any external sources of support. And there is a thyroid cancer support group that is quite widespread and quite prevalent. THYCA, T-H-Y-C-A. What role did THYCA play in terms of your addressing the caregiving needs of your husband and 2 daughters?
THYCA was wonderful. They were my family that provided me with support when we didn't have a lot of support here in Dubuque. So I can't tell you how appreciative I am of THYCA, the organization, everybody in it. You know, when I was at my lowest point, I had no idea where to go, what to do. They really helped me out. Those were one of the resources that I tapped into when I was doing research. They provided me with so much information, free information. I was just overwhelmed with the outpouring of support by everyone. I refer to them still as my THYCA family because they are my family. Alyssa and I continue to go to the THYCA conferences when we can. She started going with me when she was 14, which is pretty young, but they all adored her, took her under their wing. We continue to go to conferences now. She's 24. THYCA is a very special group of people and an exceptional agency.
And if you want to contact them, their website, their address is pretty easy to remember. It's just thyca.org. Our guest is Pam Mendenhall of Dubuque, Iowa, and we are talking about her extensive caregiving journey as it has evolved. You had mentioned earlier, and we want to talk about this a little bit more, Pam, the whole notion of genetic testing. Would you say that you are now, knowing what you know, would you say now that you are an advocate of genetic testing?
I'm a very strong advocate of genetic testing. I believe that knowledge is power, and us going in and having the genetic workup done, basically it told us that, hey, your family is at higher risk for these other diseases or cancers they could have. You need to get screened. So I'm hoping with this knowledge and the earlier screening for my family that a lot of these cancers, diseases could be prevented or at least caught early. Now,
and do you feel like this genetic testing, you had mentioned a whole litany of different cancers that it alerted you of their possibility. Do you feel like thanks to genetic testing, you're sort of out in front of these different types of cancers?
I do, because a lot of these cancers I think are preventable, or I don't want to say the word curable. I don't know that anything is curable, but I know, with breast cancer, with colon cancer, I know early detection is the key. And if you're being screened for it, having surveillance in these areas, even skin cancer, all of these cancers, early detection saves lives. So I do believe that, yes.
And you had earlier referenced the importance of knowledge. Knowledge is power, and certainly with any phase of medicine. Things are constantly evolving. I think I already know the answer to this question. I just want to hear the answer in your words. How important is it to stay on top of that evolving knowledge where genetic testing is concerned?
Obviously extremely important to stay on top of that. When we started this journey 15 years ago, whole exome sequencing was not available at the time. It is now. Also, what is available now that wasn't 15 years ago is molecular testing. So we could have Alyssa's thyroid tested for molecularly to determine if there are other mutations too that could have caused her thyroid cancer.
Now, you had mentioned, and I want to get back to your family members, of all the different tests that they are going to have to undergo going forward so that they can try to stay out in front of this. But physically, how close are they to 100% in terms of the activities that they want to do in terms of going about their lives?
I would say they're both at 100%. Alyssa's currently a biomedical engineer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So she's in the medical field. She's working on pig livers for transplantation into humans. So, goes to work every day, exercises, she lives a normal life aside from she has to take Synthroid every day and has to have her blood work done, see an endocrinologist. She's to the point that she has not yet had to have some of these follow-up surveillance testing done because she's only 24. My youngest is living a full life. She's in the physical therapy program at St. Ambrose University in Davenport. So they're both very high achieving, very successful, young adults now. I want to call them children, but I guess they're young adults. So they're functioning well right now.
Now, Pam, if we go back to the very beginning of this journey, before you even found out that anything was wrong with Alyssa, who was ultimately diagnosed with with thyroid cancer, you mentioned being kind of stressed out at the early stage, which I think anybody would be in that situation. But you sound like you've been pretty calm in your demeanor in dealing with this. Is there something that I'm missing here? But how emotionally difficult has this whole experience been for you?
It's been very emotionally difficult. And like a lot of people say, it's kind of been a roller coaster ride for the last 15 years. Every time before a doctor's appointment, I still get sick to my stomach for fear of what might happen, of what they might find. I know that part of what's helped me cope, and I'm hoping has helped others too, is FICA. I'm also a volunteer there. I'm the moderator of their site that provides support to parents whose children have been diagnosed with thyroid cancer. So I know how it feels for them to have that initial diagnosis, to not know what to do, to not know where to go. And so, and of course I say I'm not a medical doctor. I can't provide medical advice, but I try to provide them with some support that they need. So that helps me too, I think, to get through sometimes. But very emotional roller coaster and feeling very helpless. With the genetics, there's not much, you can't change your genetics, at least not at this point.
Any other source of strength for you going through this? We've mentioned THICA, but anything individual, friends, anything else that has been a source of strength?
Yeah, I had, and my husband, of course, was there. Although I was the primary caretaker, he was there to support me. He was kind of the calming factor. I tended to be real heightened, and he would bring me down. So that helped me a lot. My mom helped out too when, my daughter needed someplace to go for a few days. My sister also offered to help. Good friends, people I work with would bring food over and things for us and, say, what can we do to help? Basically, after Alyssa was diagnosed, I would say that the first few weeks that I worked, like between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I was not functioning very well at work. So my colleagues chipped in, took over, said, Pam, do what you need to do. we'll take over. So that was a big source of support.
Did you ever find yourself having to regulate the amount of support? In other words, in some instances, is there such a thing as too much of a good thing, and you had to, as discreetly as possible, ask friends maybe to back off a little bit?
I did with one person. She and everybody has such good intentions. They really do. But I mean, as you know, I mean, some days you kind of feel like talking about it, and other days it's just too much. Sometimes you just need a break. So there was a point where I just needed a break for about a week or two, not to talk about cancer with anyone. And they respected that, and I took that break.
Okay, Pam, we're going to start wrapping up now, and we always start our interviews at the same point, and we try to end at something resembling the same point, and that is as follows. Pretend, if you would, for a moment that you suddenly find yourself with a private audience with somebody who is in the position that you were in at the very beginning of all this. If there's any one overarching bit of advice you could share with that individual, what would it be?
Well, and I share that now pretty frequently, being a moderator on the website, but probably the most important piece of advice that I could give would be to get a second opinion. Getting a second opinion, at least in our case, is what saved my daughter's life, and possibly my other daughter's life. It's worth the time, the money, especially when you have a diagnosis as rare as what my daughter's was. So again, I'd strongly recommend that people get a second opinion, especially if, like me, you have that gut feeling that something just isn't right, something just isn't adding up, because getting that second opinion could ultimately save a life.
Okay, wonderful. Pam, thanks so much for sharing your story with us. There was a lot of information in this, but there was a lot of the stuff that is non-informational, that is more emotional to deal with. And for any caregiver, that is most definitely a big part of the equation. So Pam, thanks again for being with us on Cancer Interviews.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it.
And we want to remind you from Cancer Interviews that as you go along your cancer journey, you are not alone. TEAM, together, everyone achieves more. So that's it for this time. But until next time, take care, and we'll see you on down the road.
Thanks for joining us today. For more information, please visit us online at cancerinterviews.com. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you back here again next time on the Cancer Interviews podcast.